At Clyde Bergemann Delta Ducon, we have designed and engineered the PermaFlow Extreme Feeder for longevity and superior performance.
In the event that maintenance is required, the following program will provide you with step-by-step instructions for adjusting the rotor and replacing the rotor and shoe in your Delta Ducon XL rotary feeder. Before proceeding with preventative maintenance or maintenance procedures, complying with all safety standards, including those established at your plant, as well as those in the safety section of the manual. When isolating the equipment for inspection or maintenance, be sure to disable the equipment electrically. Isolate the equipment mechanically from the system by means of gates, valves, etc. Isolate all air and water supply lines to the equipment. Follow the equipment tagging procedure established at your plant, and be certain proper notification is given to those in authority. Keep in mind that all clearances are those recommended at system operating temperatures. If cold clearance settings are preferred, they must be established in the field. You will need the following tools before adjusting or replacing the rotor: Allen wrenches, hex wrenches, a mallet, and a feeler gauge. For this training video, we have already removed chain guard, chain, and sprockets. Videotaping was done under ideal conditions. First, remove the pipe plugs in the end covers of the feeder housing. Use your feeler gauge to check the clearance between the shoe and the rotor. Refer to your drawing and manual for clearance. If adjustment is required, remove the 6 sealing cap screws and washers. This will expose the set screws. You'll find that 4 are located near the top and 2 are located near the bottom. Use your Allen wrench to back off the 4 top set screws one turn so as not to lose the clamp strip inside the feeder. And then loosen the acorn nuts. After that, loosen the nuts that hold the end covers to the feeder housing. When moving the end covers, carefully break the seal between the end covers and their gaskets. Now, jack up the end covers using an Allen wrench in the bottom 2 set screws. Tighten the set screws alternately until the rotor is up against the shoe at both ends. Verify that the rotor is against the shoe by inspecting each inspection hole. Use the top 4 set screws to get the most accurate alignment possible. Next, tighten the acorn nuts. When this is done, tighten the top 4 set screws. This will lock the shoe securely in place. Next, alternately back off the bottom 2 screws until the rotor can be turned by hand. You may find that it is necessary to tap the end covers down with a soft mallet or a hammer and a piece of wood. If you have to do this, use care so you don't break the end covers. Refer to your Delta Ducon drawing for proper clearance. Snug down the 4 nuts in the opposite corners of the end covers. Now rotate the rotor at least 1 complete turn and recheck the clearance. If it's still correct, tighten the remaining bolts in a crisscross pattern, similar to tightening the lug nuts on a car wheel. Install the sealing bolts and washers. And finally, the pipe plugs. If the feeder clearance adjustment cannot be maintained, it may be necessary to replace the rotor and shoe. When removing the rotor assembly, note that the sprocket end of the shaft has a locking bearing assembly. The other end of the shaft has a floating bearing assembly. Remove the two bottom sealing bolts and washers to expose the two bottom set screws. Back off the two bottom set screws to lower the end covers and increase the rotor shoe clearance. You may find that it's necessary to tap the end covers down with a soft hammer as the set screws are loosened. Now remove the nuts and lock washers and slide the bearing assembly from the shaft. Remove the nuts and washers and slide the gland follower from the shaft. Now, while supporting the end shaft, remove the nuts and washers and carefully slide one end cover from the housing. Before removing the rotor, be sure the set screw is below the surface of the housing. Carefully remove the rotor assembly. For demonstration purposes, we have used a hoist. You may want to use a portable hoist, a sling, or a come-along. To remove the shoe after the rotor assembly has been removed, remove the four top sealing bolts and washers. Back off the four set screws. Now, while supporting the shoe, remove the acorn nuts and washers from one clamp strip. Next, remove the studs and slide the clamp strip out. Detach the acorn nuts and washers from the other side. Lower the shoe and remove the clamp strip with studs attached through the open side. Take care not to lose the clamp strips through the bottom of the feeder. Lower and remove the shoe through the open side. To install the shoe, first replace one of the clamp strips. Put on the washers and partially tighten the acorn nuts. The clamp strip will hang loosely from the top of the feeder housing. Next, place the shoe through the end cover opening and raise it at an angle to fit under the loose clamp strip. Now position the second clamp strip in place and raise the shoe until the clamp strip bolts emerge from the top of the feeder. Now replace the washers and acorn nuts. To install the rotor assembly, remember, use caution and make certain that the rotor shaft is supported in a level position until the bearing assembly is reinstalled. Position the rotor assembly in the housing. Carefully remove the packing rings and lantern ring from the end cover. The lantern ring may be difficult to remove. You may use screws in the tapped holes to aid in the removal. Clean all parts thoroughly and inspect for wear. Install the end cover using a new gasket. Loosely put on the nuts and washers by hand. Now install the shaft packing using the following procedure. The packing must be installed in this order: 1 packing ring, 1 lantern ring, and then 2 more packing rings. Make certain that the joints of the packing rings are not directly above the joints of any other packing ring to ensure a secure seal. Install the gland follower and tighten the nut sufficiently to seal. Now, to install the bearing assembly on the sprocket end, follow this procedure. Slide the bearing assembly on the shaft and fasten it to the end cover. Using 4 lock washers and nuts. Ensure that the rotor is centered from side to side in the feeder housing by following this procedure. With the bearing set screws loose, push the rotor shaft from the sprocket end, the end with the keyway, until the rotor is against the side cover of the opposite end. Mark the shaft at the bearing collar. Now push the rotor shaft from the opposite end until the rotor is against the side cover on the sprocket side. Measure the distance from the shaft collar to the mark made previously. Mark the shaft at the halfway point of the measurement. Push the rotor shaft in until the shaft collar is over this mark. Verify that the rotor is centered under the shoe by checking through the 4 inspection holes in the side covers. Tighten the bearing set screws on the sprocket end only. The bearing at the sprocket end is fixed. The bearing at the opposite end should be allowed to float. If there are set screws at the non-drive end, they should be removed. Now adjust the rotor and shoe clearance by following the procedure demonstrated in the rotor adjustment segment of this video. This service video is provided as part of our ongoing commitment to product and customer service excellence.
At Clyde Bergemann Delta Ducon.